Hello again, my friends, and welcome back to another lovely session of me telling you stories as a furry animal dressed in a top hat. That sounds really pretentious when I say it that way, doesn't it? Well, be things as they may, I'm here telling a story, and hopefully you're here listening to a story. So, shall we begin? I thought today I would tell the story of the Enchanted Watch, which is English-French fairy tale, probably from the late 1600s, or possibly from the late 1800s. Who knows? I know Andrew Lang wrote it down in 1892. So, once upon a time, there lived a rich man, and as a rich man, he had 3 sons. When they grew up, he sent the eldest son to travel and see the world, because, that's what you do. 3 years passed before this eldest son saw his family again, and when he returned, he was magnificently dressed, and his father was so delighted with his behavior that he gave him a great feast in his honor, to which all relations and friends were invited. When all the rejoicings had ended, the second son begged to have leave of his father to go in turn to travel and mix with the world. The father was enchanted at this request and gave him plenty of money for his expenses, saying, "If you behave as well as your brother, I will do honor to you as I did to him." Because, pretentiousness. The young man promised to do his best, and his conduct during those 3 years was all that it should be, which is, he was a rich ponce and he traveled around the world throwing money at things. Then when he went home, and his father was so pleased with him that his feast of welcome was even more splendid than his eldest brother. But then came the third brother, whose name was Janik, or maybe Johnny, no one really remembers. But he was considered the most foolish of all of them. He never did anything at home except sit over the stove and dirty himself with the ashes, which makes no sense why anyone would do that, because it's dumb. But he also begged his father's leave to travel for 3 years. "Go if you like, you idiot, but what good will it do you? Because verbal abuse is the way we communicate our love to our children without educating them." Yay. But the youth paid no heed to his father's observation, as long as he obtained permission to go. The father saw him depart with joy, glad to get rid of him, and gave him a handsome sum of money for his needs, because that's how we solve our problems. Once, as he was making one of his journeys, John managed to cross the meadow where some shepherds were about to kill a dog. He entreated them to spare the dog, because there wasn't really any reason to kill it, and to give it to him instead, which they did. And then he continued on his way, followed by the dog. A bit further, he came upon a cat, which someone was going to put to death. He implored for its life, and the cat followed him. Finally, in another place, he saved a serpent, which was also handed over to him, and now they made a party of 4, the dog behind him, the cat behind the dog, and the serpent behind the cat. So then the serpent said to John, "Go wherever you see me go, for in the autumn, when all the serpents hide themselves in their holes, this serpent was going to go in search of his king, who is the king of all snakes." Then the serpent added, "My king will scold me for my long absence. Everyone else is housed for the winter, and I am very late. I shall have to tell him what danger I have been in, and how, without your help, I should certainly have lost my life. The king will ask you what you'd like in return. Be sure to beg for the watch which hangs on the wall. It's all sorts of wonderful properties, and you need only rub it to get whatever you like." Well, no sooner said than done. Janik became master of the watch, and the moment he got out, he wished to put its virtues to the proof. He was hungry, so he thought it would be delightful to eat in the meadow, with a loaf of new bread and a steak of good beef washed down by a flask of wine. So he scratched on that watch, and in an instant it was all before him. Imagine his joy, because socialism's okay when you're rich. Evening soon came, and John rubbed his watch and thought it would be very pleasant to have a room with a comfortable bed and a good supper, and in an instant they were all before him. And after supper he went to bed and slept until morning, in a room without walls in the middle of a field, as every honest man is ought to do. Then he set forth for his father's house, his mind dwelling upon the feast that should be awaiting him. But as he returned in the same old clothes in which he went away, his father flew into a great rage and refused to do anything for him, because being a selfish bastard is apparently where it's at. Janek went back to his old place near the stove and dirtied himself in the ashes without anybody minding because I have no idea. The third day, feeling rather dull, he thought it would be nice to see a 3-story house filled with beautiful furniture, and with the vessels of silver and gold. So he pulled out his watch and rubbed it, and there it all was. And Janek went to look for his father and said to him, "You've offered me no feast of welcome, but permit me to give one to you. Come and let me show you my plate." His father was astonished and longed to know where his son had gotten all this wealth. But John didn't reply. Begged him to invite all their friends and relations to a grand banquet because, money is the only way to impress people. So father invited all the world, all of it, every little last bit. And everyone was amazed to see such splendid things. So much plate, so many fine dish on the table. Yeah, it's totally written this way. After the first course, Janek prayed to his father to invite the king, because apparently the king's not part of the world, and his daughter, the princess. He rubbed upon the watch and wished for a carriage ornamented with gold and silver, drawn by 6 horses, with harnesses glittering with precious stones. The father did not dare to sit in this gorgeous coach, and went to the palace on foot, because, you don't want to look richer than the people who are richer than you. It gets you killed. The king and his daughter were immensely surprised with the beauty of that carriage, and mounted the steps at once to go to the banquet. Then John rubbed his watch again and wished for that 6 miles on the way to the house should be paved with marble. Whosoever felt so astonished as the king, never had he traveled over such a gorgeous road, and thought he would have to raise all the taxes. When John heard the wheels of the carriage, he rubbed his watch and wished for a still more beautiful house, 4 stories high, hung with gold and silver and damask, filled with wonderful tables covered with dishes such as no king had ever eaten before. The king, the queen, and the princess were speechless with surprise. Never had they seen such a splendid palace, nor such a high feast. And at dessert, the king asked Jenek's father to give him the young man for a son-in-law. No sooner said than done, because money speaks all languages. The marriage took place at once, and the king returned to his own palace and left Janek with his wife in the enchanted house. Now John was never a very clever man, and at the end of a very short time he began to bore his wife, because he was dumb. She inquired how he managed to build palaces and get so many precious things. And he told her all about the watch, and she never rested until she had stolen it, because greed. One night she took the watch, rubbed it, and wished for a carriage drawn by 4 horses. And in this carriage she set out at once for her father's palace. There she called to her own attendants, who for some reason were at the palace and not at her house, and bade them follow her into the carriage. She drove straight to the seaside. Then she rubbed the watch, and wished that the sea might be crossed by a bridge, and that a magnificent palace might rise in the middle of the sea. No sooner said than done. The princess entered the house, rubbed upon the watch, and in an instant the bridge was gone. Because this made a lot of sense. Left alone again, John felt very miserable. His father, his mother, his brothers, and indeed everyone all laughed at him because, that made a lot of sense. Nothing remained to him but the cat and the dog whose lives he had saved. He took them with him and went far, far away, because he could no longer live with his abusive and money-ridden, greedy family. He came to at last a great desert, and saw some crows flying towards a mountain. One of those crows was a long way behind. When he arrived, his brothers inquired what made him so late. "Winter is here," they said. "It's time to fly to other countries." He told them that he had seen in the middle of the sea a castle of the most wonderful house ever built. Somehow John overheard this, and at once concluded that this must be hiding his wife, who he tricked into marrying him with a magic watch. So he proceeded directly to the shore with his dog and his cat. When he arrived at the beach, he said to the dog, "You are an excellent swimmer, and you are very light," to the cat. "Jump upon the dog's back, and he will take you to the palace. Once there, he will hide himself near the door, and you must steal secretly in and try to get hold of my watch." Of course this was done, and the 2 animals crossed the sea, because, okay. The dog hid out near the house, and the cat stole into the chambers. The princess recognized him and guessed why he'd come. She took the watch back down to the cellar and locked it in a box, because a cellar in a house in the middle of the ocean makes so much sense. But the cat wriggled its way into the cellar, and the moment the princess turned her back, he scratched and scratched and scratched till he made a hole in the box. And then he took the watch between his teeth and waited till the princess came back. Scarcely had she opened the door when the cat was gone again, and the watch into the bargain. The cat went to the gates, where she then said to the dog, "We are going to cross the sea. Be very careful not to speak to me." The dog laid this to heart and said nothing. When they approached the shore, he could not help asking, "Have you got the watch?" The cat didn't answer, as he was afraid he might let the talisman fall. But when they touched the shore, the dog repeated his question. "Yes," said the cat, and the watch fell into the sea. And the dog and the cat began to fight, accusing the other. Both looked sorrowfully at the place where their treasure had fallen in. Suddenly a fish appeared at the edge of the sea. The cat seized it and thought it would make a good supper. "I have 9 little children," cried the fish. "Spare the father of the family." "Granted," said the cat, "but you have to go find this watch." The fish went to the bottom of the sea and found the watch, brought back the treasure to the master, the cat and the dog alongside. John rubbed the watch and wished the palace with the princess and all its inhabitants should be swallowed up by the sea. Because, honesty does not beget honesty, or 2 wrongs don't make a right, or don't steal my watch, something. No sooner said than done. John returned to his parents, who immediately forgave him everything because that's not gaslighting. And he and his watch and his cat and his dog lived happily to the end of the days, rubbing themselves with ashes by the stove, apparently. This is a strange and funny story. Apparently the moral of the story is don't steal a watch. I don't know. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed having you here. We'll explore something new again next week. Hope that you have a great weekend and everything goes well. Don't panic.